Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Today, we have one of my favorite type of episodes in which I bring in sports industry expert for a deep dive into the football ecosystem. And my guest today is someone who knows a lot about the current state of the industry. Keith Wyness, former CEO at clubs like Aberdeen FC, Everton FC, and Aston Villa FC, joins me for a fun conversation about the state of the English Premier League. There's so much going on there. But that's not all. And I also ask him about the most important business lessons he has learned over the course of his career, and his views on the ambition of the Saudi Pro League to become a top-tier league. Given his role as a consultant for them, I thought his opinion would be very relevant. Before we go into it though, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. You would not believe how much that helps us. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, where every week we send updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find a link in the show notes. Remember, this 2024, we have events in London, Mexico, Sevilla. You can check it all out on our website, and hopefully we'll meet you there. And now, let's welcome Keith Wyness. Well, Keith, welcome to the World Football Summit podcast. I am looking forward to this conversation very, very much because I think the audience is going to learn, I'm going to learn, and there's so much to talk about. So yes, welcome.
Well, great. I'm really honored to be here, and hopefully my years of experience can pass on some thoughts and some ideas to your listeners and viewers.
Oh, I'm sure they will. But, for those that are a bit, lost, I was wondering if you can briefly introduce yourself. And you know what, Keith, I always like to ask my guests, why did you decide to pursue a career in football?
Well, it's an interesting story. At the time when I joined football, most of the people at the executive level were actually from football itself. And I'd actually had quite a wide business experience outside of football. I'd started off in the travel industry where I'd worked with British Airways on the Concorde, and I set up the British Airways Executive Club, the Frequent Flyer program. I then went on to set up a cruise line. And after the cruise line was very successful, I was then asked to become a managing director down at the Sydney Olympics. And I went down there in 95 and had 5 years in Sydney working on the Olympics, which was fantastic. So that was my crossover between, sort of travel and into sport. And so after the Olympics, my father unfortunately passed away back in my hometown of Aberdeen. And I had to go back and look after my mother. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do back in Aberdeen, as it was mainly North Sea oil and different things, which I had no experience in. And so they said, well, why don't you go and run the football club? And I ended up in the year 2000 running Aberdeen. And after Aberdeen, then I went on to Everton and Aston Villa and stayed in football for the last 25 years. So really, it's been about 30 years of sporting experience. But I've got to say, there was no set plan. A bit of serendipity got me into football.
But it's a good analogy to football. The game happens and you have to react, and then there you go, you succeed. So yeah.
Absolutely right. It's football. You never know what's around the corner.
It's unpredictable,
Yeah.
Anyway, Keith, and the reason I was so willing to, I wanted to have this conversation, really, there's so much going on in the Premier League, so many updates. And I was wondering who would be a good expert to talk to. And I'm just so excited to have you here because we're going to talk about a lot of things. So I think we should start, and maybe let's take a bit of a step back. Let's go back to the January transfer market where, in general, the market was a bit slow. And when you look at the English Premier League, they were even outspent by League One. And this was a year in which I think the amount spent was around £100 million, if my research works well. Whereas a year prior, it was slightly above 800 million. So what happened there? Why did those numbers decrease dramatically?
Yeah, I can see all the football agents are sitting there starving after that sort of very very short transfer window for them and not much activity. But I think it happened to be a divergence of many different things that happened to come together. For instance, the sort of things that were happening at clubs like Liverpool, where they had obviously known that Klopp was about to leave. I believe that internally they knew that back in November. They were probably going to wait in the January window anyway because they got a new management team coming in.
Hmm.
So that's one of the reasons for Liverpool. Chelsea had the issues around Todd Bowley and the overspend that they'd already done in the previous windows. So that was another big club that was silent. Man City was sitting under the 115 charges. So, another reason for them perhaps to hold back. So many of the top clubs had different outside reasons as to why, a lot of business didn't happen. Even Arsenal, I don't think there was any need at that time to move forward. So it was a strange window. And I think there was also a recognition that overspending had to be re-looked at again because they were seeing clubs like Everton getting point deductions.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, the sustainability rules came into a very sharp focus.
Yeah.
And so along with the actual, individual circumstances of those clubs, there was this overarching feeling about sort of a bit more prudence. And so it all got together to become a very, very quiet window. I think it's a real one-off, though. I don't think there's any reason why that should be continuing for a long time yet.
Yeah, it just seemed like different elements came together. They created the perfect storm. But then there's other signs that point you to believe that, the Premier League, it's already the most popular football league in the world. It's going to be like that for years to come. And one such example is they still dominate the Deloitte Money League, no? When you look at the top 20, 8 of the top 20 clubs are from, the English Premier League. And actually, out of the top 30, 14, played in the English Premier League last year, no? So do you think their dominance is going to end anytime soon? Or
I really can't see it. I mean, La Liga has made a lot of noises, and they're actually doing well in terms of trying to increase revenues, but still, they're a long way behind the Premier League, as we all know. And in football, there's always that correlation between money and points and success. And so I think we're going to see the Premier League go further. It's particularly its success in the USA right now with the numbers rating through the roof still with NBC. Its popularity still in Asia. There's no reason now it's reached the tipping point and it's gone beyond. So it would take a lot for it to sort of drop down from its dominant position.
yeah, it definitely seems that's going to be. I mean, I totally agree with that. No, and one of the things that stood out to me is that Manchester United was ranked fifth in that report. But when you look at their performance on the pitch over the last several years, it hasn't been the best. Let's just leave it like that. So, how have they been able to keep such a strong brand despite not being able to perform on the pitch?
Yeah, it is a fascinating situation because everybody normally assumes that international fans in particular will follow the more successful club at the time. Now, in my time in the Premier League, I analysed the international fan to a great extent. And in a funny way, I always looked at them as an adolescent fan outside of the UK, where it tended to be that the fans did pick the bigger clubs and then eventually settled after a few years on another club that they got some affiliation to. As many kids in Britain did, that when they were younger, when they're 10, 11 years old, they picked a bigger club, but gradually moved to another club, is what the fan behaviour has been. So Man United, though, have been able, for some reason, to cement that sort of brand. I don't think there's a big churn in the fan base overseas. I think it is people remaining reasonably loyal. And I think fans are learning that it's more fun being a fan when you support the club through thick and thin. And often it's the other side that is the best. And that is part of the beauty of being a fan of a club and recognizing that you have to go through those things and defend them amongst your social groups and support them. And that's what being a supporter is about. And
Yeah,
so hopefully people are learning that. And Man United, with its huge starting point as a dominant position where it is in terms of a major international fan base, then it's understandable to see how they've made that still a bit sticky.
yeah. You know what? That brings to mind an interview I heard with Peter Moore, former CEO at Liverpool. He was saying that during his time, it was the international fan, the one that had highest lifetime value, which kind of, I think, correlates very well with what you're saying. It's just, that's kind of like, the fan that, if that's the fan that spends most, it seems logical to see that they're kind of like being interested in the brand of the club and Manchester United with its legacy and with its dominance around the world. That would explain that.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so I think the Premier League, and I have a lot of respect for Peter. I think he did a great job when he was at Liverpool. But I think the Premier League and the clubs in it have done a terrible job of actually getting in touch with the fan bases overseas and growing those fan bases and keeping much better fan engagement. I've been working a lot with a couple of companies now on how that can be improved and how to actually service those fans and keep in touch with them a lot better. Because there's no doubt that is a huge untapped resource for many clubs still to work with.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like the missing link. There's so much focus right now on the local fan and the local community. It seems like even it's like a bad image if you start, taking care of the international fan and forgetting about your local fan base, in a way. And Keith, speaking about brand, the current situation with the English Premier League, I'm wondering where you see Nottingham Forest this week has been, deducted 4 points. Everton has also seen points deduction. Manchester City, they're being investigated as well. And I know we said that the English Premier League is the strongest league in the world, but how does this type of situation impact the brand, especially maybe at the international level where we don't see these type of examples? What's your overall assessment?
I can't tell you how angry I am at the moment about how the Premier League has handled this situation. It is an absolute mess. And it could end up that we have the table finished at the last game of the season, and there still could be two asterisks on clubs, and nobody knows who's relegated and who isn't. And a league exists and is successful due to its sporting integrity. And now we're actually facing a situation where the sporting integrity of the whole league could be in question in terms of who's up and who's down. You're looking at a table right now where you don't really know what's going to happen, and the outcome is in the hands of lawyers rather than your centre forward, and it's absolutely terrible. And I'm absolutely shocked that the Premier League have let it go this far. So there's a lot of unhappiness in the UK about the way it's being handled right now.
And I guess so, because the domino effect of this it seems infinite. I mean, what's going to happen if some clubs get relegated? Are they going to come back and say, hey, I was impacted by this situation, but then I played my game at the beginning of the season. And then if I should have known, my strategy would have changed. I mean, there's so many.
There are so many things like that, as well as things like players deciding, right now, some of the players will be thinking, do I want to move? Whereas I would have been happy to have stayed. There are so many, points that these points deductions go way beyond what the punishment was supposed to be. It goes way beyond points deductions, and it isn't just a dropping a couple of points on the table. It impacts the whole structure and fabric of the club, and therefore the league. And also, clubs you're playing against may decide different formations to play in a particular game because they think something else is at stake. So it is definitely eating away at the sporting integrity. And certainly, I'm hypercritical of particularly the chairman of the Premier League, who has been completely invisible in the process, and the chief executive, who've been responsible for putting this whole system in place. And I mean, I've been reading the 50-page document that have been coming out of these settlements. They are so conflicting in the way that they are judging each case, because it's independent commissions with different judgments, that it's, we're now in the hands where, as I say, a lawyer is more important for a club now than their left back. And that is a very frightening place for the club to get to. And so I think there's going to be a big summit this summer, I'm sure, at the Premier League summer meeting. And there's going to be some really hard words spoken. They've got to get a grip on this, definitely.
I didn't see it from that angle, but you're probably right. The role of a lawyer right now, because of so many things happening, it's just crucial, no?
It's absolutely crucial. And I believe, I haven't had it verified, but I believe Manchester City have got can we say, quite a large legal department now, probably on a par with their medical department. It's frightening that clubs are having to go that way, because it's not just these issues with the Premier League. As you've probably heard, other clubs may be threatening to sue other clubs because of particularly they think unfair sporting advantage. So this degenerates into a situation where the lawyers are rubbing their hands, very, very happy. I've always been one that wants to see sporting things happen on the pitch and keep the integrity. And the minute we're in the courts and the minute we're using, in Britain, we call them a KC, it's it's quite strange. I thought the other day that the Everton fans know the name Lawrence Rabinowitz KC. Nottingham Forest know the name Nick DeMarco KC.
Yeah.
Yet some of them couldn't name their youth team. And
Yeah.
so that to me is a damning indictment of what's going on right now.
And one question, Keith, because speaking about roles, this week we've also seen some updates in terms of the role of the independent regulator and some proposals that have gone, and this is very recent news. Do you think the role of an independent regulator would have helped solve this issue? Or let's frame it another way. From a scale on 1 to 10, how much do you believe this role is needed right now in English football?
I think it's about a one.
Okay.
I've had many interactions with politicians during my whole football career. It always seems to be at the time when it's close to election or when it helps them with name recognition for themselves before an election. They're rarely there when there's a real issue that needs to be resolved. So I've got little faith in politicians actually solving this better than the football authorities. In terms of this issue itself, I think rather than a regulator, perhaps we should be looking more for a stronger sort of commissioner type position that they have in the US, who can intervene when needed. But the trouble is with the regulator, you get mission creep, is what they would call it. And so it starts to interfere in the whole process. And you start getting political decisions and people currying favor for votes. And that's exactly where we don't want to be. There's nothing right now with a new independent regulator process in Britain that could not be handled by the authorities stepping up and doing a better job. The FA in England has been, supposedly, is the regulator, but they've been so pathetic at doing that. If they got their act together and were strengthened, had some backbone, they wouldn't need an independent regulator. The same thing with, part of this independent regulator is to get the fan, in theory, the fans more involved in clubs. Well, a lot of clubs are doing that right now. And, fan engagement is good. It's healthy. It's what should be done. And there's no reason why that can't be done again. We don't need political interference to do that. So for me, I see it as a 1, if not a 0.
Oh, okay. There you go. And I guess I'm wondering, I mean, it's just striking the level of uncertainty that you see across many fronts in what we believe is the most powerful league in the world, no? Yeah, it is surprising. Just as it is surprising the uncertainty around what's going to happen with Everton and their takeover from 77 Partners, excuse me. I'm not sure if I can ask you this, but given your background as CEO of Everton, I don't know if you have any type of assessment of what's going to happen there.
Before I get on to that one, let me just address what you mentioned there about the Premier League and its position as a big situation right now. What we're seeing here, I think, is the whole Premier League evolving. Now, when I was there, we were just starting to get nation states involved in clubs and different things like that. So that's created a whole new environment, and it's been very difficult for the Premier League to grapple with that. And I understand that. And so I think we're in a process where it's evolving, and I think the right solutions will come. It maybe haven't come quick enough for my liking, but I think they will come. So I think the Premier League will evolve, and eventually the solutions will be found. Now, getting back to your specific question about Everton, obviously I've followed the whole 777 issue very, very closely. What I can say is that we looked recently at Manchester United, who sold, I believe, nearly 30% of the club to Jim Ratcliffe.
Mm-hmm.
That was approved in 51 days by the Premier League.
Yeah.
We're now into almost over 6 months of the Premier League looking at 777. There is no doubt there is what I would call a lot of noise around 777.
Yeah.
There are many lawsuits in different areas in the States, in the UK. There's a lot of issues around where their funding is coming from. How secure is that funding? They still claim that they have got, that they're going to be approved. And yet I was told it was going to be this Monday was supposed to be the time when it was supposed to be approved again. Here we are Wednesday. The one thing in their favour is that they have apparently lent Everton up to about £180 million already. So in that case, they have, they put the money where their mouth is, and they've done that. So they deserve credit for that. However, I think the Premier League is in a tough situation because if they don't approve 777, there could be litigation from 777 to the Premier League. But also, if they approve them and then something bad happens down the road, the Premier League are there as well. They're in trouble. So it's a catch-22. One. I think what may come, and my hunch would be that the Premier League can approve, but with certain caveats on the way the 7-7 Act. That could be something like putting some sort of bond in place for future revenues, etc. So that could be the solution for all parties. But the length of time itself does point to the fact that there's been a lot of questions, a lot of issues around them. And there have been issues at the other clubs they own. It's not been smooth sailing in all of them. But, listen, as I say, they did put up some serious money for Everton. So we have to take that into account as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a tricky situation, right? Because what happens if that doesn't get approved?
Well,
And
don't know the detail, do we? I mean, you'd assume that any new owner that came in would want to repay that.
exactly,
We don't know if that debt converts into equity. We just don't know the details. So
exactly.
it's difficult to assess, but it's certainly another watch this space classic football soap opera.
Again, another element of uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then and you mentioned it, you alluded that 7-7 partners with other clubs, and I'm wondering, they're one of the big proponents of the multi-club ownership model,
Yeah.
which is something that very recently Newcastle admitted that they were exploring, right? As a governance model, and given your role at clubs in the past, Aberdeen, Everton, Aston Villa, what's your thought on the model overall?
I'm actually a fan of the multi-club situation. I think there's a lot to be gained, particularly in trying to raise levels in the smaller clubs, levels of experience, and having the ability to tap into really high quality experience at the top level of the halo club, if you like, of the multi-club group. One thing I would caution, though, on any multi-club group, and again, I will pick on 777 as an example, where I would hope multi-club owners would look to try and take sustainable clubs that are already sustainable and not loss-making clubs into the group. Because if you take one, two, three, four clubs that already are loss-making, and you hope to then turn them round into profitable clubs, all you've got is four loss-making clubs. And it's very, very hard to turn those around when you start to look at different numbers.
Mhm.
So it's the ones that are successful, that have done a really good model, take care, pick them sensibly, and you've really got to look at the existing management, the existing catchment area. There are so many things that people have got wrong in how they select those clubs, but if selected properly, I say I'm a big fan of the multi-club model. I think it can work. I do believe they shouldn't be so close geographically.
Mhm.
One of the things I'd always found in my own experience is that when we had club alliances rather than a multi-club situation, it became crucial that the key staff in each of the clubs liked each other and could actually speak and get on. It's very hard for somebody at my level to then impose that alliance or that sort of closeness together on the management team. So it's important there is some chemistry and that you really look at beyond just what seems to make sense.
Mhm.
You're actually looking, to try and build a cohesive group together. So there's a lot more to it, but if it's done correctly, I really believe there's something to it.
Yeah, it does get more complex, obviously. But if it works, I mean, you do have good examples there, right? Look at Manchester City and what
Well,
they're doing. So that's one
yeah,
example there, no?
it can be executed correctly, but again, I think City have taken their time. As I say, they've done a lot of work behind the scenes. They've tried to match up the personnel, all the things I mentioned. They've tried to do. Perhaps though, it's difficult now getting, I think, 12, 13 clubs almost now.
Yeah.
And then you start wondering, are there now political considerations being made there? I see the latest Turkish club coming in.
Mhm.
A lot of wondering whether there is political consideration behind that. So you never know. As I say, in football, things we just have to watch each development. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that should be banned. I think it's something perhaps needs a little bit more regulation. But I'm not a fan of regulation or over regulation either. But there has to be some parameters. I think we've got close with the Red Bull clubs to having a
Yeah.
problem there. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened with Man City and Girona this year.
Mhm.
Would have been fascinating to see how that would have played out.
Yeah.
So it's another area that we have to look at. But passing skills and knowledge down the chain, I think, is a good thing overall.
I totally agree with what you said. I mean, I don't think the solution is to ban it because it's a reality that's there. And not only in football, across other sports and
Yeah,
across business, it's a business practice.
yeah,
What you have to work on is how do I apply this business practice over to football
correct.
to kind of not impact the integrity of the competition, which is at the end of the day what football is about,
Yeah,
right?
well, we violently agree.
Yeah. And speaking about integrity, one of the critiques of well, I don't know if I can call it Super League anymore because they don't, apparently they don't have the rights to use the name, but I think we understand each other. This was one of the critiques of the Super League, that it violated the integrity of the game. But then I was speaking with Steve Mendes on the podcast a few weeks ago, and his argument was, if you think about it, the English Premier League is, in a way, the Super League, because you always have the big six, if you will, up there competing, and then there's the rest of them. Given your experience in the league and your knowledge, what are your thoughts on that argument?
I don't think I necessarily totally agree. I think the Premier League and the Champions League put together create probably the supreme level. I think the Champions League is still a great competition, and I hope it's not going to get ruined by some tinkering and all this seeding, which I think is wrong. But I think the Champions League itself, to me, is still one of the great showcases.
Mm-hmm.
That was always the argument against the Super League, that the Champions League is there, and that effectively does give the fans that European interaction which many of them crave. So the Premier League is probably a dominant league, but to me, the competition that still has that magic is still the Champions League.
Yeah, agreed. And speaking about the Super League and its commercial ambitions, or business ambitions, if you will, they were speaking about being able to generate around 5 billion euros. I think it was euros or dollars. I don't remember. But anyway, 5 billion for its clubs. That's a lot of money. Do you think that's feasible?
Well, I know that there was talks with the investment banks in New York. I was aware of a number of those talks, but again, one of the problems always aimed at the Super League was that this was becoming a solution to bail out the clubs that had spent too much, like Juve and Real Madrid and Barcelona, and that seemed to be one of the big reasons behind it. Is it possible to generate that? Yes, I think it is. I think there is now a demand for that sort of product to some degree, although I think we're seeing the biggest market of all, of course, USA, being quite happy with what the product is at the moment. It's on offer. So I don't think there would be any great desire, as we know right now, to move it forward. We're also seeing governments block this. I mean, this was one of the key things. We talked about the independent regulator in the UK. This was another one of their major points, is that they would block any move and destroying the football pyramid that we have in the UK. So you'll see government interference now, I think, towards the any potential new Super League push.
Okay. See, I knew this was going to be a lot of fun, Keith. Thank you for this great overview around about the Premier League and the Super League and all that. And I'm going to take advantage of having you here to also ask about some lessons you've learned over your career in your different roles, and I guess also combine that with some other trends we're seeing across the football industry. One of the most important, or at least in my opinion, is to see how many clubs are investing in revamping their stadium. So, for example, you look at Manchester City, Real Madrid just opened up their stadium. FC Barcelona is working on that. Even Manchester United, which we were talking about before, have declared in their intention on improving the Old Trafford. So, why do you believe that top clubs in Europe are investing in enhancing their stadium experience?
There's no doubt, and I've been working closely with some of the top companies in this space about fan engagement, and they see it really. You've got to go right from when they wake up in the morning of match day. They've got to know what the traffic situations are, where their parking space is going to be, what's the special offer on merchandise for the fan, all the stats during the game, how do they order their food and catering. All the levels that you can go to now for a fan experience are going to be there. And that's what the new stadiums are actually aiming at, is not just the actual match day and the actual match 90 minutes experience. It's going way beyond that. As I say, it's the whole 12 hours around the game. And that's where a lot of the fan zones and the different situations and, catering offerings, etc., are all coming together now. And it's a constant competition against other types of entertainment, and football must raise its game. And we're seeing at the top that it's already happening. Right, Man United are doing well. I'm very, very excited about the Everton Stadium. I've been around because I think that possibly could be the best football stadium in the world when it's built. And I say that in competition with Spurs, who are more of a multi-sport stadium. whereas Everton will be, I think, a classic football stadium, which I think is the difference between the two. And so I think the atmosphere has been really thought about there by the architects. So it's all these things are starting at the top now, and look, those things tend to filter down over time. And so clubs will always try and raise their fan engagement levels, and they will copy the way that the big clubs do it. The technology will become cheaper and more accessible. And so hopefully, we can try to see that the fan will be appreciated more at every level of the game.
Mhm.
And it becomes easier for clubs to do this. There's been a big barrier with technology costs and different things. I remember must have been back when I first joined football. The big thing was going to be about CRM, customer relationship.
Yeah.
That was the big thing, and it never really happened.
Mhm.
There was a lot of cost involved. There was a lot of things that every collected databases and names and then did nothing with them. So I think now we're actually seeing where, particularly with a bit of artificial intelligence help as well, we're seeing those sort of things coming to fruition at a sensible cost and can actually genuinely make an impact on what the fan gets for their day, their match day. And it's something I really encourage, and I've been working hard with some companies to try and do that because that's going to be the lifeblood of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the Premier League all day. Part of the Premier League's charm and existence is because when they show the games internationally, there's a very fertile, vibrant fan crowd in the stadiums. And that's part of the beauty is the excitement and the fervor of the crowds at those stadiums. So that's got to be protected at all costs.
Yeah. And you know what? I believe the live experience is what sets football apart or sports in general versus other forms of entertainment. That's one piece of it. And then the second piece of it, which I actually heard this argument during an interview we're going to publish soon with a marketing director from an Italian club. I just can't say who it is just yet. But his argument was, and I thought it was interesting. We understand that the life experience that the match day revenues are not going to be our biggest source of revenue, but it is the most important door opener because it opens up deals in concessions and licensing, but also commercial opportunities, even broadcasting. So it drives greater revenue from the other sport business pillars, if you will, right? So it makes sense in the world. And yes, I'm also excited to see what Everton are going to do if that uncertainty we were alluded to before kind of gets cleared, So
Yes, it's definitely as we've said many times in this chat. It's another uncertainty, but there's no doubt it's. I've been along to see it, and it's a really interesting stadium. But yeah,
and
the fan
and
experience is crucial.
it is, but also it impacts broadcasting, and I think it's also a good time to speak about broadcasting because when you look at the latest deal that the English Premier League was able to announce, the overall value has increased. I think it's at £6.7 billion. No,
Yep.
problem is there's more games that are going to be broadcasted, so the overall or the average value per game has decreased. Then you look at Serie A, their rights were acquired for 4.5 million euros, which is a decrease. I think it was about 3%. So what's happening there? Because traditionally, broadcasting has been, I would argue, the most important source of revenue for clubs. Is that a cause for concern?
Well, okay, right. There's a couple of points here. Let me just go back a little bit, and it'll play into the point we're talking about. We're talking about new facilities and new stadiums and how that can affect the fan. It also affects the broadcasters.
Mhm.
And I'll give you an example. I mean, I was recently down at Atletico Madrid for a Champions League game against Celtic. I happened to sit next to the guys who were from the NFL, and they were doing a whole research program around the different stadiums as to where they might hold an NFL game.
Yeah.
The comparison was that the Metropolitano in
Yeah.
Atletico had far superior broadcasting facilities. And so this becomes another major part of the revenue stream. Now, in answer to your question just now, is this a cause for concern? Certainly the facilities that the broadcasters are going to need to improve their own broadcasts and therefore create more advertising revenue at their end is something they're going to be searching for as well. But I think the overarching answer to what you're talking about is that the ways that the game is being received now with streaming and all the over the top, the OTT types of broadcasts are a real challenge to the established media. Also, piracy, I mean, has been there forever, but it's getting worse. And I think that's another key cause for concern. So I do think that we're reaching a bit of a plateau in terms of that particular legacy, what I call legacy media revenue streams that can come into the game. That's why the clubs have got to be agile, the leagues have got to be agile, and either work and developing their own. I mean, it's been talked about as having the league should have their own Netflix, if you like. Do they go that route? They've got to, because these new media streams and new media techniques are becoming very viable. And it's just that the landscape's continually evolving. And if we are going to grow those big revenues, they've got to be able to do it.
Yeah, something has to be done there. And I guess also some innovation needs to be coming from the commercial side of it, no? Which is the other key pillar, no? We talked about match day, we talked about broadcasting, and now we look into commercial strategy. And I guess I was wondering, given your career so far, if you have identified key pillars for a successful commercial strategy, or maybe there's a football property out there that you think is doing a fantastic job that you want to call out. Take it either way you want.
Well, there are some, the key pillars. Again, like we say, football is always evolving. And I've always been a great believer that my business plan for any club I've been involved in is not too detailed, believe it or not. I want to build a spine of a business plan, just like a spine of a team, with the goalkeeper, the central defense, midfield, striker. I want to have a business plan that has clear, identifiable big goal, but leave myself complete flexibility to be able to adapt to new technology and take it forward. I was perhaps, though, often guilty of trying to adapt and adopt new technology too quickly sometimes. I was particularly keen to adopt virtual reality. I was looking at one stage to try and film the games and then sell season tickets in virtual reality to China. We did a huge experiment with that at Aston Villa in terms of the cameras and the way we were going to do that. But the technology wasn't quite ready for it yet.
Yeah.
So, I was trying to break in there. There are other things that we've tried to do with, turning season ticket cards into credit cards, so we can track the spending of the fans and then go to sponsors with better updated numbers. Many ways we can try and do things, but it's difficult to be an early adopter. But you've got to follow those trends with new technology. There's no doubt you've got to have an eye on something that'll try and give you a difference and a chance to go forward. But at the same time, you've got to be realistic. I've had my fingers burnt a couple of times. I'll carry on trying, find that breakthrough where I can do.
In a way, that reminds me of a conversation I had with Pet Bettis on the podcast, and he's an expert on everything related to Web3 and its application to sports. And we were discussing how Manchester United is implementing Web3 technology,
Yep.
And kind of like the main conclusion there was they're testing, they're seeing how fans accept the technology, which I think is a big piece there.
Yeah.
And then they're going to think about how to best optimize the business model. But they're not thinking about monetizing from the get-go.
Yep.
To your point, I think they have big goals, and I like the approach. They have big goals. They're just being very flexible, and they're allowing themselves the time to really understand the space and to understand how it fits in the model. Oh?
Well, it's okay if you've got the luxury of time like Man United may have. A lot of clubs don't.
Yeah.
And so you've got to make some pretty tough business decisions and try and move things forward. And in that situation. And, you may have made a forecast in your budget and somehow you've got to meet it. And you've got to take a gamble sometimes. I mean, it's the same with players. Sir Alex Ferguson always said that 50% of your transfers you get wrong. So maybe we get 50% of the commercial gambles wrong as well. I don't know if it's that. Hopefully it's not going to be that high. Otherwise I'd get sacked everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you've got to do your research. I think you've got to do your case studies pretty quickly. I think United have got a luxury. I would argue that United have been too slow in the market and have dragged behind many clubs. And I think it's there's a middle ground somewhere that I think we've got to find.
Interesting. And I've always wondered how people like yourself manage those situations where what the long-term vision or the long-term decision has to be, but the short-term pressure is so strong. I've always wondered how you manage that kind of situations.
Well, as I say, you've got to go with your gut. You've got to believe in what you're trying to do. Obviously, you discuss it and talk to people with some experience if possible. But if you're trying something new, there aren't many people with that experience, obviously. And so you've got to just go with it. And I've always been lucky enough to have been involved, as I mentioned, with British Airways. I was involved in cruise ships. We built the world's first twin-hull cruise ship. And in football, I've always tried to adopt new things where I can do so. I'll never give up that hope that we're going to find the next golden ticket.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, Thank you for that masterclass. I'm sure that people listening have learned quite a lot. And I know that we're not going to be the only ones benefiting from your knowledge and experience because you're also collaborating, if I'm not mistaken, with the Saudi Pro League and the PIF, no, and developing, all the ambition behind Saudi Arabia's push to becoming top tier football league, right?
Yes, yeah, I've been talking with the PIF and also working on some projects to help make sure the game develops properly in Saudi.
And I guess I'm wondering, given your expertise and what you've seen and your conversations with them, do you think that the league there, the Saudi Pro League, can realistically compete both at on the pitch and off the pitch with the top tier leagues in Europe?
Well, the comparison has always been with the Chinese bubble that burst a
Yeah.
few years ago, and people were trying to compare it with that. I disagree. I think the foundations are much stronger. I think the desire is stronger. I don't think the political vacillation will be there that there was in China. I think the Saudi league can become a very powerful league. It's not going to happen in the next 1 or 2 years or 3 years. I think between 5 and 10 years, we're going to see a bit of a sea change. Whereas at one stage, I'd always thought it was going to be the MLS in America, the Premier League in Europe, and I thought the Chinese Super League at one time. Now I think the Saudi League may be the third league that could become pretty important. There's so much to be done, though. I mean, the way that the Saudi football authorities have been able to influence FIFA in terms of getting the World Cup and in the regulation of the game. Who knows where that picture may look like in terms of football politics down the road? It's a fascinating picture to watch as to how that develops as well. So we'll see, but there's no doubt I've been very, very impressed with some of the people I've been working with in Saudi. The vision is definitely there. There's no doubt about it. Resources are there. I think they can reimagine a lot of things in football, but they've got to make it their own and they've got to make it a real Saudi product rather than just try and copy what is existing in the Premier League. And that's going to be the key to it for me, is that they do try and develop something that is unique and different and has a point of difference beyond just the 90 minutes.
I agree with that point very, very much. If you think about it, the English Premier League was set early 90s. You would argue it took them around 20 years, more or less, to become the top league in the world, no? Because back then you had Serie A, then La Liga took over a little bit, no? And so obviously you can expect Saudi to become a top tier league in a couple of years. It's going to take some time, no? And to your point, I also believe that their ambition is very high, and you can see people working hard towards fulfilling that ambition. And when you look at the business side of things, I think the goal is to increase the valuation of the league from its current 800 million to, I think it's 2.1 billion by 2030. So that's a big increase. And having, commercial revenue increase from 120 million to almost 500 million annually. So do you think this is a realistic scenario?
I do think it can be. I mean, you mentioned the Premier League taking 20 years to where it is right now, but let's not forget in the early 90s, the internet wasn't really working the way it was right now. So things are moving much quicker in terms of the way fans are seeing things. But I do believe those numbers are achievable.
I
A lot will depend on resources and facilities that are built. There is a shortage of high quality facilities in Saudi right now.
Yeah.
Of course, that married to the 2034 World Cup will make a reason and a logic behind why they can actually invest in those facilities. I think we'll see some great investment and some great new stadiums. I know that places like Neom, which is the city future, is looking to develop sporting facilities there. Now, we've seen the vision that Neom has. What could a stadium look like that was a Neom type stadium? The ones in Qadiyah, the major sports.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the renderings there are looking fantastic. And so they've given us a chance to reimagine and look into the future of what the football experience could be. And it's very, very exciting. And if I was a young kid today, I'd be wanting to work on those sort of projects right now because this is where football is going to be. And that's what I think will give the Saudi League its cachet and its strength to go forward. And I think those valuation numbers may be on the low side.
Wow. And you know what? We had our event in Saudi Arabia in December, World Football Summit Asia. And I totally agree with what you said. I think one of the things that stood out to me was first the vision that they have, the passion they have for football.
Yep.
But they're also very, very hardworking people. So when they put their mind into something, they know it's going to take time, but when they really get to it, they start working.
Well, I've been lucky enough to be visiting Saudi since 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I've observed the country before the big change really with MBS coming into power and how that has changed the whole ethic within Saudi. But there are so many bright young guys down there. And as you say, I think the sky's the limit for them. And they're being led now with some vision. And I just think it's a very exciting time, not just for football, but for all of sport in that country.
Yeah, you read my mind because I was going to ask you about, you've been collaborating with them for so long, which I think the audience has to understand. We're speaking about Saudi in 2023, 2022, since Ronaldo was there. They've been working on this since way back, which speaks to the long-term vision that they have. So it's good to see, to have a point of view about how they've evolved and, how their ambition is set, no? And I guess, oh, go ahead, please.
No, I totally agree. And as I say, I've been so pleasantly surprised by the depth of knowledge about the game. As you say, the vision's been set from the top with Vision 2030 for the whole country. That is certainly coming into sport, but it's the whole country. There's a whole renewed vigor about the place that is certainly making things possible again that would never seem to be possible before. It's woken up.
And out of curiosity, we've talked about the different pillars of the sports business model. Your match day, your commercial, your broadcasting. Where do you see the most potential out of those three elements for the Saudi League?
Well, we have to go into deep cultural differences there and start to really understand those differences. One of the things I'm seeing is certainly, as I mentioned, the match day experience is going to be a key factor. There really would not be a price-sensitive situation in a lot of Saudi compared to other, like the Premier League. So therefore, you can give a very high-quality match day experience, and there's a market that will pay for that. Things like the personal meet and greet with players after the game, those sort of things are going to be big fan engagement issues. The merchandise, personalized merchandise, rather than just general merchandise. I think you've got to look differently at the cultural situations and what is different in that country. But I think there are areas I would focus on, and I want to focus on with them and teach them how to actually, or at least work with them to help get that right and focus on new revenue streams rather than just copying what the actual revenue streams have been under the pillars normally in the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to rip that book up and start again.
Oh, that's interesting. Keith, this is an excuse for me to bring you back on the show in the future to tell me about new revenue streams for clubs, because we're going to have time today to do that, because that's a whole episode in itself. No? So keep that in mind. But I did want to ask you, because again, I want to be respectful of your time, Keith. Just a few rapid fire questions before I let you go. What advice, given what you've seen in the industry over your career, what you're seeing now, you still have a strong network, you're collaborating with emerging leagues like the Saudi League. What advice would you have for those who are looking to develop a career in football?
I would say, and I do lecture on different things like this occasionally, and that's one of the questions that always comes up. And what I would say is very simply, look at things like Saudi right now, where changes are happening. Certainly look at that exciting thing and genuinely write a document about how you think you're suitable for that and get it into the right hand where you can do. Network like crazy and speak to people, use LinkedIn, use any tool available. Write to people, just they may not know you, but give them some ideas. Explain to them why you think you've got a different talent, what you think you can see that's different. Executives love that sort of, that excitement and that hunger. That's what I'm always looking for in young staff, is that excitement, hunger, and some thought. If you can show that, then I think there's every chance. Now, we look at Saudi again. I just mentioned Qiddiya, which is the big sports project down there. They're supposed to be creating 350,000 jobs around Qiddiya.
There you go.
There will be no shortage of places to go and things to do, but you've got to put yourself out there. As I've always said in life, don't stay in the stands of life, get on the pitch, and let's get out there and try and, make yourself possible if you can.
No worries, Keith. I was wondering, Keith, if I could ask you this question, because we launched a rebrand at World Football Summit last year. Basically, we believe the football industry needs to embrace innovation, which is something you alluded to before. It needs to commit to excellence, and it also needs to embrace sustainability across its three pillars. No, so it's financial, it's environmental, and it's social. And we summarized all of that under a claim, which is the football we want, the football we need. If I were to ask you to describe very briefly, 1-2 sentences, no more than that, what is the football you want or the football you need? What would you say?
I want football to create memories for families, and I want them to be proud of their club and the way they operate in their communities. Those are the things that I would love to leave. I know what it's meant for me as a young guy. Football has been in my life. It's meant the way I've communicated with my parents. It's something that is so precious. Yeah, it must play its part in the environment as well. But overall, that's what I would hope football can be, is providing great memories and great family bonds.
I love that because it rings so true to me. I always think about the memories that I get from when I think about games that I watch with my dad, my brothers, and we still go back to those, no? And it's also something that it's interesting. I've spoken, with other leaders in the industry, working at, top leagues, top clubs. The stories, the emotions that football generates, they're just so unique, no?
Absolutely. I mean, I can still remember as a 15-year-old boy standing with my father on the terraces at Aston Villa watching Pele play for Santos in a friend.
Wow. Wow.
And those things just never leave you.
Wow. And look at you. And then you ended up being CEO of Aston Villa, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go. What a journey.
It was,
What a journey. Mhm. I'm gonna ask you more a personal question, but and I'm not gonna make you choose between any of the clubs you've run just in case. But imagine you had, out of curiosity, unlimited budget and you could acquire any player in history for any of the clubs you've run. Who would it be and why?
ooh, it really is a tough one because I've obviously had to play that game for real. And I was part of the Wayne Rooney transfer that we sold him to Manchester United.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think it's a difficult one. Look, I'm still a great believer that Messi is the best player in the world. I think it would have to be him, but for many reasons, I'd be looking for a great captain as well, who may be that I think maybe Zidane. It's a hard.
Oh, wow.
So I'd look for character and personality, I think, as much as skill, because those are the players I warm to and admire. It, I'll have to think more about that one and come back next time we speak.
Okay, and that's gonna be my excuse to bring you back, Keith. Anyway, Keith, I'm not gonna entertain you any longer. I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you have to run, and this has been an amazing conversation. I had high expectations. They over delivered. Before we go, is there any last words or messages you want to share with the audience, or where can people learn more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. They can catch me. I'm always happy to speak to people and answer questions as best I can do. Always keen to hear from any clubs that want some help and advice. And I look forward to seeing people within the football world. I mean, I've done my best to always try and improve it, but I really believe that we're at a new frontier, a new edge of improving the game even further. And now is the time to be innovative and to keep going. So it's an exciting time. It's a great game to be involved in. I've made so many friends over the years. So let's just make it better and bigger.
That's a fantastic way to end. I couldn't have thought about it better myself. Keith, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope you have a great day, and I hope the audience has learned so much as I did at least. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And there you have him, Keith Wines. And as I said at the intro of the episode, these are my favorite type of episodes when someone like Keith comes along, shares their expertise, their knowledge, and just so many nuggets that you can learn from. Anyway, let me try to summarize the main takeaways from the conversation that you just had. It's not going to be easy. It is striking the level of uncertainty that the Premier League is experiencing right now, across many fronts, whether it's the different allegations and point deductions situations that you're seeing, or the role of the independent regulator, or some takeovers like the 177 Partners is trying to accomplish of Everton, but at the end of the day, I think the football industry needs and wants a strong Premier League. So hopefully we'll get that out of the way because, hey, they've provided so much joy and so many, passion and fans around the world that we need a strong Premier League, and we hope it continues to be like that. I also liked how he explained why he wants the multi-club ownership model to advance, because at the end of the day, this is a reality in football. It's a reality in business. So you cannot really avoid it. It is going to happen. So I think now is the time to really decide how to apply this to football. No, then his masterclass around what he's learned over the course of his career. And I'm gonna stay with the success factors of developing a strong commercial strategy, which is, hey, you have to have your big goals, but you really need, if you will, flexible tactics or a flexible approach to get there. You kind of have a fixed mindset, and things change so much, especially in football. You just have to be able to adapt and have a team that is able and capable and willing to do so, right? Finally, I just couldn't agree more with the assessment he's shared of the Saudi Pro League. I mean, their ambition is just off the roofs. We experienced that firsthand during World Football Summit Asia in December, no? And they have the passion, but they also have the willingness to work to get there and to accomplish that vision. No, definitely, it's going to be a league to watch out for. And as he said, maybe not in the next couple of years, but 5, 10 years, I think the game is going to change so much, right? And finally, I really love the way he defined the football he wants and the football he needs, alluding to the emotions that only football can generate. I couldn't agree more with what he'd said. Football is just a unique, not only sport, but a unique thing in life that generates the strongest emotions and creates the strongest of bonds. Hopefully, we don't lose that. I think not only does the game itself need it, but even I would argue the business needs it. Loyal fans are there because the emotions that only football can generate. Anyway, guys, if you stayed this far with us, I want to thank you. I hope if there's anything else that stood out to you from this conversation, we're always willing to listen to it. So reach out on social media. Before you go, I would ask you to subscribe and rate the podcast. It does help us to bring guests like Keith in the future. So if you can share it with other colleagues that you're interested in sharing it with, that would also help a lot. And nothing else from my side. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it, that you learned many things just like I did. And have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.